In this video, we are going to discuss how to set up security in open automation software. We will look at how to create an admin user, how to configure the default security group and what its purpose is, how to create security groups and users, and how to implement security in client applications. Security is implemented to restrict modifying configuration parameters and limit real-time and historical data access. The OAS engine can have multiple security groups defined, each with a different level of access, and each security group can have multiple users associated with it. Each user can belong to only one security group, and users are not allowed to be assigned to the default group. When you use the OAS configuration application for the first time, it will prompt you to create an admin user. To do this, go to Configure Users from the top menu. Enter a username and password for your admin user. Select the admin group for your user in the drop-down. If it is not already selected, click Add User. The admin group is predefined in OAS and has unlimited access. You can modify this to suit your needs. You will also want to review the article in our knowledge base about configuring security. It is located on our website under Support, Knowledge Base, Security, Getting Started Security. Other topics in this section include restricting tag access, CS export and import of security groups and users, programmatic interface, videos, and frequently asked questions. OAS has a default security group that cannot be removed. If a call is made to the service and it is allowed in the default group, user authentication is not required. If the function is not permissible to the default group, OAS prompts the user to log in and then checks to see if the group the user belongs to is allowed to perform this function. It is important to note that if a user fails login or is not authenticated, they will be allowed to perform any call that is permitted by the default security group. It is also important to note that the default group is always denied access to configuring security. Let's start by looking under each tab here and see what functionality can be allowed or restricted. Under the Common tab, there is the ability to start or stop the runtime, get system status, browse OPC servers, get network node names, kill the license, update OAS, work with custom objects and browse files. Unchecking this will restrict remote users from browsing the files on your system and reading your directory structure and what files are located there. Under the Tags tab, you can allow or restrict the ability to add, configure, and delete tags and groups and to read and write tag properties. Also for saving and loading tag configuration files. Here is where you would disable tags from browsing. We will discuss this more later in the video. Under the Drivers tab, you can restrict or allow access to adding, configuring, and deleting drivers. This can be done for all drivers, or you can use the box at the bottom to enable driver updates for drivers that start with a particular character sequence. Under the Read Tags tab, you can restrict or allow user groups from reading tags. This is applicable to client applications, and we will discuss this later in the video. Write tags, that's something we will discuss later as well. And under the Trends tab, you can define whether or not user groups can browse tags for selecting trend pens. Under Trends Real-Time, you can restrict or allow groups from viewing real-time trend data. The same here applies under Trend History for historical trends. Under the Data Log tab, data logging configuration can be restricted or allowed. Under the Alarms, you can restrict the ability to get the defined alarm groups, delete alarms, add alarms programmatically, and add or edit alarm comments. Under the Alarm Acknowledgement tab, you can restrict or allow the acknowledgement of alarms based on priority or alarm group. The Alarms Real-Time tab has the same setup, but is for restricting or allowing user groups to viewing real-time alarms. Same here for Alarm History. Alarm logging can be restricted or allowed under the Alarm Log tab. And alarm notifications can be restricted or allowed under the Alarm Notifications tab. Under the Dashboard tab, you can set access levels for the Web HMI dashboard to either admin, editor, operator, or no access. Under the Reports tab, you can restrict or allow user groups from configuring reports. And under the Recipes tab, you can restrict or allow user groups from configuring recipes. UDP Broadcast for one-way network transport. Under the Live Data Cloud, you can allow or restrict access to this functionality. The Security tab is for restricting or allowing the ability to define or delete security groups and users. Again, please note this is not available to the default group. Options tab, this is for setting server options. Now let's create a new security group. I'm going to call this group Acme Energy. I will enter that here in the group name box and click Add Group. Next, we would click through the tabs and define the settings we want for the group. Then click Apply Changes. If we want to add a user to the group, we would go to Configure Users from the top menu. Then we would enter a name and a password. In the Security Group drop-down, we select the group that we want. I'm going to choose Acme Energy. Click Add User. Once you have completed modifying your security settings, it is a good practice to save your settings in a configuration file. Click Save from the top menu bar. The application will then prompt you for a file name and location and creates a .security file. You will be asked whether you want to make it the default configuration to load on startup. You most often will say yes to this so that when the OAS engine restarts, it will load this configuration. This setting can be changed later on under Configure Options. Now let's take a closer look at how to restrict tag access. You can follow along with what I'm doing in the knowledge base article on this topic under Security Restrict Tag Access. It is a common scenario where you might have an OAS engine that has tags in it from multiple organizations, such as I have here in my configuration inside my customer folder with Acme Energy, Green Power People, and Star Energy. Or you might have different levels of employees from the same company in different departments, such as operations, engineering, and production. In these cases, you most likely will want to restrict tags access to users except for the tags that pertain to them. To do this, first we will go to the default group and disable tag access for all unauthenticated users. Under the Tags tab at the bottom, we will check Disable All Tags from Browsing. Then under the Read Tags tab, we will check Disable All Tags from Reading. And under the Write Tags tab, we will check Disable All Tags from Writing. I will apply the changes. Keep in mind that these settings will affect all client applications as well, so you will need to follow through with them to allow access to them with an unauthenticated user. Now that we have shut down unauthenticated access, we are going to modify our Acme Energy security group to have access to only certain tags. Under the Tags tab, I am going to check the Disable All Tags from Browsing box. Then below here, in this box, I can enable browsing tags that start with, and I will click Add. In the Tag Browser, I'm going to scroll down here to my Customers folder, choose the Acme Energy group and the Temp1 tag. Next, I'm going to back out everything after Acme Energy, so it just says customers.acme energy and say OK. And now you can see that it says enable browsing tags that start with customers.acme energy. You can click the Add button again in this box and select more than one starting sequence. I will go ahead and perform this same operation under the Read Tags tab and also the Write Tags tab. If we wanted to allow members of this group to read other tags that weren't in that folder and wanted to pick them out individually, we would use the box below. I can click Add here and select this ramp tag. Again, I can add multiple tags in here. The two boxes together create enormous flexibility and an easy way to restrict and allow the reading of tags. The Write Tags tab has the same functionality, and so does the Tags tab down below. I will apply the changes. If you have multiple users and groups to set up, you can use the CSV import and export feature on the toolbar and do it with Excel or any CSV editor. You can also set up security programmatically, which is especially useful if you have multiple systems to deploy and it needs to be dynamic. You could use our .NET Server configuration tools or the REST API. Information can be found on our knowledge base for that, and it is linked here in the Restrict Tag Access article. In our default group, if we have denied access to reading and writing to tags, any client application that tries to access the service will be denied access to this functionality. The client application will also have to have an authenticated user in order to read and write to tags, or whatever access level we want it to have. We have implemented this to give you the ability to protect your data. Here I will use a WPF.NET framework application in Visual Studio to demonstrate the tag access. I'm going to use our JDO user for this example that we created as part of the Acme Energy group in the last portion of the video. He has read, write, and browse access to the tags in the customers.acme energy folder. You can create a security group and users that suit your application's needs. The login methods are applicable for all of the .NET assemblies, the REST API, the Excel connector, the OPC UA client application, and OPC DA client applications. From the Open Automation software menu in the toolbox, I will drag over an OPC WPF label control to demonstrate tag access. Now I will set the content tag property of the label to be a tag. Notice when I open the tag browser that I need to log in up in the left-hand corner of the window in order to be able to load the tag configuration. I have this access denied in my default group, so it requires an authenticated user who is in a group that does have access. Since we are using our Acme Energy user, I will set this to one of the tags our user will have access to, customers.acmeenergy.temp1.value. Now let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. We will see that it is indicating that we have bad data quality, which could mean that we have bad data quality or that we don't have the proper credentials to read the value. There are two different ways we can give the application the proper credentials. You can call a method to have a dialog appear, or you can programmatically call the login method. This is the method I'm going to demonstrate now. Let's go back to the toolbox and add a standard button. I'm going to change it to say login. In the button click event, I'm going to instantiate a new OPC WPF dashboard login object. Step 5 of the Getting Started Security video discusses the different login controls for different applications. It also has example code. I could call the login method of this object with the following code, but instead I'm going to call the show user login method like this. So now let's run this. You can see that I am still showing bad data quality, but now I have my new login button. Clicking it brings up a login screen. I will enter in the credentials for our JDO user and say OK. Now you can see we are able to read the temp1 tag. There is also a log off method. You can call that to log the user off, or you could call the login method again and enter a different username and password to give a different level of access. Now let's take a look at logging into the REST API. We can also find documentation on this in the knowledge base. Under the security section, you will see the authenticate call. This is the first call that needs to be made to the OAS REST API, always. Here is where you pass in the username and password. I just want to point out that the REST API will not let you make any type of server configuration calls, including creating security groups and users with a blank username and password in the authenticate method, regardless of how you have set up your default group. It does require you to have an authenticated user. For security regarding web applications, you can find information in our knowledge base under Programmatic Interface, Web UI Programming, Web HMI Reference, Authentication Overview, and Authentication Examples. You will find documentation for logging into a .NET application and also using JavaScript. Another thing you may need to do is provide security to a remote OAS service or multiple remote OAS services for data logging, alarm notifications, or maybe even a remote service needs to read tags from the local service for a calculation. To do this, you would go to the Remote OAS engine and go to Configure Options, and then under the Remote Services tab, you would enter a security username and password for the user that you have created on the local system. If you need to pass security to the OAS OPC server, you will do this in a file located in the OAS installation directory, Program Files, Open Automation Software, OAS. The file is called danserv.exe.config. You do have to copy the file out of the directory, make your changes, and then copy it back in. The Windows operating system does not allow you to edit this file in place. Here is where you are going to put in the user credentials for the remote OPC server to read, write, and browse tags in the OAS engine. There is a similar setting for the remote OAS OPC UA servers. This is done under Configure Options on the Remote Services tab. In the OPC UA Security Access dropdown, you can select to leave the OAS service user as the default, or you can enter credentials for an OPC client user. For OAS Excel, there is a security option on the tag browser where you would enter credentials. You can copy the formula it creates into your workbook. It will be visible to users, so you will want to hide that column and then protect the workbook. For more information on open automation software, please visit our website at www.openautomationsoftware.com.